theyeshiva.net.
Around 10 lines from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11 lines from the top. Daf Yud Amid Beis. The end of the line, there's 2 dots, a colon. Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh. Okay. The Gemarah finished discussing this last Mishnah about Shiloi and Yerushalayim and the differences between them. And here starts a whole new sugya of Gemarah that will continue all the way until the end of Perik Rishon of Masechta Megillah, which is Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. So this continues now for around another 7 dafim, 7 pages, le'erech, until the end of Perik Aleph. And it starts off with explaining the Megillah. The next few pages are going to be explaining Megillah's Esther, verses of Megillah's Esther, but today is still going to be introductory. Zog the Gemarah. Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh. These words everybody knows. Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh HaMelech. It came to be. What does Vayehi mean? Vayehi means, we'll say it was, or it came to be. Vayehi, it came to be in the days of Achashverosh. Omer Rabbi Levi said, V'teima Rabbi Yonason. Some say it was not Levi, it was Rabbi Yonason. Davar zeh mesayres biyadenu. We have a tradition, me anshe knesses hagdolah. We have davar zeh. We have a tradition from the days of anshe knesses hagdolah, from the anshe knesses hagdolah. Who were the anshe knesses hagdolah? The men of the great assembly. This was a group of 120 great spiritual giants who helped revitalize the Jewish people in the beginning of Bayis Sheni. When the Jewish people came back from Bavel, or many Jews came back from Bavel, not most, but many, 42,000 to Eretz Yisrael, they found the country in disarray, both in terms of physical infrastructure. The Churban of Bavel, the destruction of Babylonia, left chaos, and equally the spiritual disarray. The Jewish people who remained there, were completely lost. There was intermarriage. There was alienation from Judaism. The Samaritans were taking over because they felt that's it. The Jews are gone forever. And it was just a tremendously turbulent time because everything had to be recreated. From hindsight, it's always hard to appreciate, what they went through. But whenever there's a big churban and you have to start over again, there's so much demoralization and so much cynicism. If you understand, for example, what happened to the Jewish people after the Holocaust, you have to start all over again in a new place, in a new society. So many people are not interested in it. They're like, just forget it. And it takes tremendous courage and vision and resolve and wisdom to be able to, to revitalize a nation and build a people. And this is what Anshe Knesses Hagdolah did. And they made a tremendous amount of institutions. So they're called the men of the Great Assembly. Just for little Jewish trivia, and I'm going to say Allah Havdil on this, the Israeli Knesset, its parliament, has 120 members. Why 120? Because they tried to do it based on the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. They call it Knesset. Now, I'm not comparing the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah to the Knesset parliament members, even by the furthest stretch of an imagination, or to quote Nathan Sharansky, the famous Soviet refusenik. He said, what's the difference between me and other Israeli politicians? He said, I sat in prison before I came to the Knesset. So I don't mean to compare the two. Anshe Knesset Hagdolah had in it Nevi'im and Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, Mordechai, Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, Shimon HaTzadik, some of the greatest of the great. But I'm just saying the name Knesset and the number 120 was taken from Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. Just, it's interesting to know. So Rabbi Levi, Rabbi Yonason says we have a tradition from Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. And what is the tradition? Kol Mokum Shenemar Vayehi Ein El Lashon Sar. Whenever it says in the pasuk, the language Vayehi, it represents tsar. It represents pain. Fascinating. Now you have to remember, Anshe Knesset Hagdolah are the ones who instituted Purim. Because Purim was in the time of Mordechai, who was one of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. This is the end of the 70 years of Galus Bavel and the beginning of Bayesheni. They instituted Purim, as we learned before on Daf Beis. They're the ones who wrote the Megillah. Mordechai, Esther, this is all the time on Knesset Agdola. So when he says we have a tradition from Knesset Agdola, it means a tradition from the time that Purim was established. And what's the tradition? The tradition is that whenever it says Vayehi, it's a Lashon Tsar. It's an expression of pain. In other words, it's going to introduce a painful narrative. That is what the Anshe Knesset Agdola taught us. And he starts giving many examples. Many examples. Number one, Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh. It came to be in the days of Achashverosh. No, is this a painful narrative? He says, yeah, have a Haman. Soon Haman is going to come into the picture. In the days of Achashverosh, he's going to appoint a prime minister named Haman. Rus, the opening of Rus. Vayehi-Vehaya Shveit HaShoftim. It came to be in the days of Shveit HaShoftim, the judges of judges, as the Gemarah says, a generation when people judged its judges. Shveit HaShoftim. Everybody judged its judges. Meaning, nobody respected any authority. Havarav continues, Vayirav, there's a tremendous famine. Elimelech and his wife Naomi and his two sons, Machlon and Kilian, leave Beit Lechem, and they go to the plains of Moab, and that's where they marry two non-Jewish Moabite women, right? Rus and Nama, and the whole continuation of the story. It starts off, Vayehi. Next, Bereshis, Perek Vav, the end of Bereshis. Vayehi ki heichel Adam l'roiv. As man began to increase on the planet. And the pasuk continues and says, Vayar Hashem ki rabba ras ha'adam. God saw how excessive is the evil of human behavior, which results in the flood, which wipes out all the inhabitants on the earth. So it starts off, Vayehi ki heichel Adam l'roiv. It came to be as man began to increase, as humanity began to increase, and the pasuk continues, Vayar Hashem ki rabba ras Adam, a few psukim later. Vayar Hashem ki rabba ras Adam, barz v'chol yitzim achshu is liber rak kol hayom. I'm just going to tell you an interesting commentary here of the Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes, the second Ger Rebbe, he asks a question. He says, the Gemarah here goes from Pasuk Al, Bereshis Perek Vav Pasuk Aleph to Pasuk Hey. Vayehi ki heichel Adam l'roiv, and then he skips 5 psukim. Vayar Hashem ki rabba ras Adam. God saw how bad is the evil of man, and he says that God says, I made a mistake, and I'm going to bring a flood and so forth. He says, but that Pasuk itself says something. That Pasuk itself says, as man began to increase, Vayikach vayikchu lehem noshim. People, they took any women they wanted. There was a complete breakdown of family respect, of morality and relationships. There was absolute promiscuity, complete anarchy when it came to sexuality and relationships. So the Sfas Emes asks a question. The sin is always more significant than the punishment of the sin, because the punishment is only the consequence. The sin is really the tragedy, right? The punishment is just the result, but the sin is the tragedy. That's the problem. The punishment is just coming because of the sin. So the Sfas Emes says the chet is more serious than the oynish, than the punishment for the chet. So the Gemarah should have said Vayehi ki heichel Adam l'roiv and then continue Vayikchu lehem noshim. Talk about the sin. Instead, he speaks about, to prove that Vayehi is painful, he speaks about what God's response was. You want to bring out that Vayehi is painful. This pasuk itself tells you that it's painful. It tells you about the sin itself. No, he skips to the consequence, to the punishment. So the truth is that the Sfas Emes' question, he was mechaven, because in many versions of the text of the Gemarah, they bring Vayiru bnei Elokim as bnei Sa'adam. That he brings the psukim that discuss their sin. But according to our version, it's a question. So the Sfas Emes says that this pasuk brings out how bad the sin was. He says it in Gemarah, it's really like a spiritual vart. He says, Vayar Hashem ki rabba ras ha'adam. That God saw how bad man's evil was. It means that the evil was so serious that, so to speak, it triggered God himself. And which part is it? Vayar Hashem. Hashem is Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is Midas HaRachamim, which represents, Yud Kei Vav Kei represents God's Shem HaEtzem, his essential name, and the name of compassion. And he says that even Yud Kei Vav Kei should see Ki Rabba Ras Adam. It brings out how deep the Ra was. How deep the Ra was. That's why the Gemarah brings this pasuk. Next, Parshas Noach, Vayehi b'Nosam Mikedem. It came to be as they traveled from the east. And what happens next? Hava nivna lano ir. They decide to build a city and a tower known as the Tower of Babel. Next, Parshas Lech Lecha. Vayehi b'mei Amrafel. It was in the days of Amrafel. He speaks about the battle between the 4 kings against the 5 kings, as a result of which Lot was kidnapped, and Avram had to go to war to save him. Asu milchama, they made war. Next, Yehoshua chapter 5. Vayehi b'yos Yehoshua b'Yerichai. Came to be as Yehoshua was in Yericha, and he lifts up his eyes and he sees a man standing in front of him. V'charboi shlufa b'yadoi, and the man has a sword. Next, Vayehi Hashem es Yehoshua. God is together with Yehoshua. It came to be that Hashem is with Yehoshua, and after that, Vayimalu b'nei Yisrael, when the Jews conquer Yericha, Yehoshua prohibited them to take anything of the spoil of Yericha, but one man transgressed his commandment and took the spoil. So this is Vayimalu b'nei Yisrael. The Jews betrayed the commitment that they made to Yehoshua, that they would not take. They betrayed the commandment of Yeshua not to take any of the spoil of Yericha. There was a man who did Achan, and the consequences were dire. Here again, Vayehi is the beginning of a painful narrative. Shmuel, Aleph, Perik Aleph, Pasuk Aleph, Samuel 1:1. Vayehi ish echad min haramasayim. It came to be there was a man from a place called Ramasayim. His name is Elkanah. Elkanah has 2 wives, Pnina and Chana, and Pasuk Hey, Ki es Chana oiv Hashem sagarachma. He loved Chana, but Hashem has closed her womb. Chana would not have children. Here again, the Vayehi is the beginning of a painful narrative. Shmuel, Aleph, Perik Ches, Vayehi, Kasher Zakin Shmuel. Came to be Shmuel was older, and afterwards we learn V'lo yholchu banov bidrachav. Shmuel had the 2 children who did not follow in his ways. So here again, Vayehi is the beginning of a painful narrative. When a person gets old, but there's children who follow the legacy, who continue and perpetuate the person's life, it's a very different experience, because old age is part of life. But the Vayehi is lo yholchu banav bidrachav. Also in Shmuel, Vayehi David l'chol drachav maskil. David, in all of his ways, was extremely perceptive and wise. Vashem imai, and Hashem was with him. David was extremely maskil. Maskil means he was like successful. He was matzliach, and Hashem is with him. But Shaul becomes jealous of him. And therefore the pasuk says, Vayehi Shaul oyein as David. Shaul despises David. He loathes David. He looks at him with a bad eye because of David's success. So here you actually have 2 Vayehis. You have Vayehi David l'chol drachav maskil, and Vayehi Shaul oyein as David, which is a little strange because you already have a second Vayehi. In the other ones, you have 1 Vayehi. The Gemarah is explaining why that Vayehi is painful. But here, you have two Vayehis. But that's why Rashi says that it's connected, because the Vayehi Shaul oyein came because of David's success. The first Vayehi brought the second Vayehi. Finally, Vayehi ki yashav hamelech bebeisai Shmuel beis. As the king sat in his home, David HaMelech, he was told, Rak ata lo sivna habayis, you will not build the Beis HaMikdash. David HaMelech is the king. What's the Vayehi? It's a wonderful era. The answer is, as we learn in Divrei Hayam, Hashem says, you will not build the Beis HaMikdash because you poured a lot of blood, you spilled a lot of blood. Only your son is going to build the Beis HaMikdash. So even though it seems like he sat in his home, and the pasuk says God gave him serenity from his enemies, but there was another component there that caused David HaMelech pain. What did the Gemarah just do? It brought a bunch of Vayehis in the Tanakh, beginning with Bereshis, going through the Sifrei Nevi'im, that all seem to authenticate the words of Anshe Knesset Agdoila, that Vayehi is Lashon Sar. It represents something painful, the beginning of a painful narrative, beginning with Vayehi b'mei Achashverosh, which is the discussion here. A lot of Vayehis, right? A lot of.
It looks like they wanted to bring every single thing.
It's fascinating. Now the question, what? Because Vayehi David l'chol drachav masklin, as a result of that, Shaul really did not take a liking to David. Yeah, Vayehi Shaul oyein as David. That's the Vayehi. Now the question is, why would we say this about Vayehi? Like, what do we want from Vayehi? Vayehi just means Vayehi, and it was, and it came to be. Like, Vayehi, like, why is that a bad word? It came to be. Whatever came to, yeah, it could be bad. So some say the Marsha says that the Gemarah understands that Vayehi is a combination of two words, Vai and Hoy. Vai is like woe, and hey, or he, they used to do by lamentations, by eulogies, it was a sign of grief. So Vai is like oy, like we have oive, right? Oive, yeah. So Vayehi, they understood as a combination of two words that represent lamentation, that represent sadness, because Vai is the Aramaic translation of the word oy. Like we have oy no lono kichalon, we say oy, and Vai is the Aramaic translation of the word oy. And the same is true, hoy. Hoy is also, represents sadness. And the same is true, he, you have in Yecheskel, kinim Vayehi-Vehaya. It's like when people eulogize, nehi, lamdena b'nai seichem nehi, v'isha ru'usa kina, is a pasuk. So therefore, it's a combination of these two words. There's another interpretation by the Monos Halevi. The Monos Halevi is a commentary on Megillah by Rabbi Shlomo Halevi El-Kabetz. And he says something fascinating. The Medrash says, in Bereshis Rabbah, that Vayehi is pain, and Vehaya is Simcha. When it says Vayehi, it represents pain, and Vehaya is Lashon Simcha. What's the difference? So he says something very interesting. He says, let's take the word Vayehi, and let's take the word Vehaya. The word Vayehi is made up of 4 letters. Vav, Yud, Hey, Yud. Vav, Yud, Hey, Yud. Okay? Take out the Vav, is Yehi. Yehi always speaks about the future. Yehi means, God said, Yehi let there be light. Vayehi and there was light. Yehi is always the future. Yehi let there be light. Yehi this, let there be. When you put a vav in the beginning, it transforms it to the past. It takes the future and transforms the future into the past. That's what Vayehi does. Without the vav, it's always the future. Vayomer Elokim, Yehi let there be light. You put in a vav, and it becomes Vayehi, and it was. Now take Haya. What does Haya mean? What does the word Haya mean? Was. That's Haya, right? Haya, Hoive, V'yeh. Haya, it was, right? Pam lifnei kama shanim haya sipur kazeh, right? A couple of years ago, Haya, there was. Now you put in a vav, what happens? It's the future. V'haya ki savayu ela aretz. When you will come to the land, right? V'haya kasher. So Vayehi is the future, and the vav turned it into the past. Haya is the past, and the vav turns it into the future. So the Monos Halevi says that's why Vayehi is tsar, and V'haya is simcha. Because Yehi is the future, but you want to turn it into the past. You want it to be something of the past, right? Haya is the past, but you want it to be in the future. So he says, because this is something of tsar, so you're like, let's get it over with. And this is something of joy. Ooh, I wish we can have it again. Could we do this next week again? Could we do this next year again? This gathering was great. I'm so upset it stopped. I'm so upset that it's something of the past and all I have is a picture. Let's do it tomorrow again. That's what the Monos Halevi says. If I could just expand what he's saying in a little bit more psychological terms, I would say like this. There's 2 approaches to life. One approach to life is Vayehi, and one approach to life is V'haya. The approach to life of Vayehi is, you'll hear it in English, and it came to be, and it came to pass. What am I? I'm a victim. It came to be. As I say, Chaval al Azman, this is reality, Vayehi. That's tsar. What's the tsar? The tsar is that you're a victim. What's V'haya? V'haya is it will be. Somebody once said, history is going to be kind to me because I'm going to write it. Or somebody once said, right? If you want to change the future, create it. If you want change, be the agent of change. It's a very different philosophy. I once heard from Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau. You know Rabbi Lau, the former chief rabbi of Israel. That after the Yom Kippur War, 1973, he went to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe turned to him. It was the middle of the night. I heard this from him. And the Rebbe turned to him in his room and said, Rav Lau, Rabbi Lau, or Rav Lau. They would speak in Yiddish. Rav Lau was a Polish Yid from Pietrkov, Poland. He said, Rabbi Lau, or Rabbi Shalmei, whatever he called him. I think he said Rabbi Lau. He said, Vos tutzach in Eretz Yisrael. Tell me about the mood, the climate in Eretz Yisrael in Israel. So he said, Rabbi Lau speaks dramatically and elegantly. He says, Lubavitcher Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael, Zogin Yidden, vos geht sein. In Israel, Jews are saying, what's going to be? What's going to be? So he says, the Rebbe looked at him very seriously and said, by Jews, we don't ask the question, what's going to be? By Jews, we ask the question, what are we going to do? That's the question. Not what's going to be. What are we going to do? What's the difference? In one is Vayehi. It came to be. What? Look, watch, kvetch. Kvetch, huh? Despair, you're a passive victim. Vehaya is, I'm proactive. It's gonna be. How is it gonna be? I'll work on it. At least I'm optimistic. There's a positive attitude. So it's fascinating. The Medrash says, Vayehi lashon sar, Vehaya lashon simcha. In Vayehi, everything becomes past. It's out of my control. It was. What do you want from me? It happened before I was born. In Vehaya, everything is in the future. Even the past becomes the future. And it's a brilliant insight on the Manas Alev. In Vayehi, you take even the future and you make it past. You're a victim about everything. Even tomorrow's chassan is going to be a disaster. You know why? Because if you know my father, and you know my mother, and you know my uncle, and you know my grandmother, and you know the dysfunction in our family for 20 generations, you know that it's hopeless. It didn't even happen yet. No, it's hopeless. Even the future is hopeless. Why? Because it's always the past. And Vehaya, even the past is not hopeless. Because it becomes part of a future. The future can fix things. And that creates Simcha. It's where you are. When you're a place of tsar, it's Vayehi. When you're a place of Simcha, it's Vehaya. Yeah. Yeah. When there's an attitude of Vayehi, the Torah says it's a painful attitude. The attitude of Vehaya is a Simchadik attitude. Isn't that lovely? Yeah. But this is what the Gemarah is saying. Kol makom shenavayi, whenever you have an attitude and it came to be, it's not a place to hang out. You don't want to hang out over there. You hear Vehaya, now you're good. This is where you want to hang out. It's a place of Simcha, this is where you want to be. That's what the Manas Halevi says. Unbelievable insight in life. And the key is that Vayehi takes even the past, even the future, and brings it to the past. In other words, I'm such a victim that I don't believe in future. All futures is just a result of the past. Because his marriage was 20 years miserable, it's going to be forever miserable. There's a new day today. No, there's no new day today. It's all the past. Because he wasn't a good father for 10 years, he's never going to be a good father. Because my kid doesn't speak to me, that's all Lashon Sar. Vehaya means even the past. I don't look at past. I look at future. Lashon Simcha. The rest, I'm blaming the future on the past. Yeah. That's what I think the depth is. I don't even have a future because I believe the whole future is defined by the past. And Vehaya is the exact opposite. Even the past can become a thing of the future. Even the past can become a thing of the future. Because Haya is past and Vehaya makes it Asid. So these two words, Vayehi and Vehaya, make all the difference. Yeah, the Vayehi itself could be transformed into a Vehaya.
How do we slug up those who forget the past or doomed to repeat it?
You don't forget the past, but you don't remain stuck in the past. You never forget the past. You have to use the past as a springboard for awareness, but don't get stuck there. There's a very big difference. Learn from it always. History is critical. Thank you. But we don't believe history repeats itself. That's the point. That's the difference. Vayehi is, history repeats itself. It was always that way. It's corrupt. It's always corrupt. It'll always be corrupt. You think you're a Chacham, you're going to change the world. You're not going to change the world. Go take a coffee, take a pill, and go to sleep. You understand? Vayehi, it was this way before you were born, after you die. Leave it alone. That's an attitude. They say there's three types of people: those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who want to know what happened. So you have to decide which one you're going to be. You know, are you going to make it happen, watch it happen, or be one of those? They have to tell them what happened.
Very proactive.
Very. He could not tolerate Vayehi. He was allergic. If you came to the Rebbe with an attitude of Vayehi, he was allergic to it. He was just allergic to it. He could not. It was just like he didn't have space for it. There was no. And deliberately he didn't have space for it because he didn't want other people. I once heard from Rabbi Sachs, another chief rabbi, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former British chief rabbi. I heard from him that he was a student in Cambridge University in the 1960s. And he also came to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the late 60s. And it's interesting. It just came to me and I realized how similar the stories are. Rabbi Lau and Rabbi Sachs. And both of them are great personalities. And they have done a tremendous amount for the Jewish people. You know, Rabbi Lau in Israel and Rabbi Sachs in England and around the world. They're really spokesmen for the Jewish people. And it's interesting. Both of them had the similar story with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So I heard this from Rabbi Sachs. He was Anyach. He was by the Rebbe. He was a confused Jewish student. He was in his 60s. He was studying philosophy. You know, he didn't know exactly what he wants to be. So the furthest thing on his mind was he's going to become a rabbi, a spiritual leader, a spiritual teacher. He was studying philosophy. He was thinking about business or philosophy. But he spoke to the Rebbe for, I think, he said around 2 hours. In the middle of the night, one night. And at the end, the Rebbe turned to him and said, "You asked me so many questions," because he kept on asking questions. "Can I ask you one question?" So he didn't know what was coming. He said, "Sure." So he said, "I just have one question. What are you doing for Jewish life in Cambridge? What are you doing for Jewish life in Cambridge University? You're there. What are you doing?" So he said, "I was not doing anything for Jewish." And he told over he said, "I was doing nothing, and I wasn't interested in doing anything. It was not my passion. I was just a Jewish kid, but I didn't want to tell it to the Rebbe. You know, he's British and a gentleman. It's not an American. Yeah, you have to be nice." So he starts telling the Rebbe. He says these words: "In the situation I find myself in," and he wanted to finish the sentence. You know, some British excuse like, "You know, the situation I find myself in, I can't, I'm paralyzed, and this." So he said the Rebbe interrupted him in the middle of a sentence, interrupted him, and said a person never finds himself in any situation. A person puts himself into situations. And if you put yourself in one situation, you can always put yourself in another situation. That was it. And he looked at him and he said, "I see and I believe that your role is to become a great Jewish leader and a rabbi's rabbi, train rabbis." And he said he said he would be looking at somebody with longer hair and tell him, "You know, your role is tomorrow to become an astronaut and train people to live on Mars." I mean, it wasn't just like a different level. It was like, that was it. Yeah. He said this when he became chief rabbi of Britain. He said, "Here I am, chief rabbi of England." But so when I heard the story from him, I thought to myself, the Rebbe, I saw many times, was makbid not to interrupt people in the middle of sentences. He would never. He would let people finish, and then he would say what he wanted to say. There was even a Jews for Jay guy who came and tried to convince the Rebbe to convert, to go to Christianity and this, and the Rebbe didn't interrupt him. He finished. He challenged him pretty heavily, but he did not interrupt him out of menschlichkeit, I guess. Rabbi Sachs is a gentleman. He's a British gentleman, and he interrupted him in the middle of a sentence. And then I realized the interruption was essential to the message, because we all have voices all day in our head. In the situation I find myself in. The Rebbe was saying you have to interrupt that sentence. Interrupt it. Because that sentence is derailing your course of life. Interrupt that sentence in your brain and say, "I don't find myself in a situation. I put myself in a situation." Yes, there may be circumstances that are above my control. But how I respond and deal with those circumstances, how I interpret them, what they mean for me, that's a choice. That's the difference between Vayehi and Vehaya.
So if there's so many Vayehis that we're going through, Right? These are people who are allowing themselves to have history dictate.
History dictate them, yeah. They found themselves in situations. They found themselves. And sometimes it's a very deep experience inside a person. So this is a question you have to really ask yourself. How do I live life? Do I find myself in situations or do I create situations? When you have this attitude, like Rabashkin in prison, he developed this attitude, and in many ways, he really didn't experience himself as a prisoner. You know, when he came out of prison after 8 years, so a few people in Monsey and other people called me or texted me and said, since you're close to him, because I went there a few times, it's really important that he gets a good therapist to adjust to the real world. And they gave me suggestions I should try. Said after all the dancing, he's going to dance for a week, in Kiryas Yoel and 770 and Lakewood. All's good and fine, but you got to go to therapy. So, okay. So I thought about it. Anyway, around 3 days after he came out, or 2 days after he came out, he came to my house. It was private. There were no cameras there. It was one of the visits without the cameras. And we were sitting and schmoozing. So he says, by the way, a lot of people are telling me I have to go to therapy. What's your opinion? I looked at him and they have to go to therapy. You don't have to go to therapy. Those who are out of prison need therapy. They have a lot of anxiety. You don't have to go to therapy. He says, I don't feel like I have to go to therapy. You think I'm crazy? And then I realized something. In his consciousness, he was not in prison. What do you mean? He was physically there. Of course he was. He couldn't go out. But in his consciousness, he decided this is a shlichus of Hashem. God sent me here, and therefore I'm not defined by the circumstances.
I think he told the story, one of the mafia guys.
Yeah.
Told him out.
Yeah. You're not here. Yeah. There was a mafia person who told him something very privately. And he said, why would you tell this to me? He says, because you're not really here. You're not really here. You're not Mishaluni. You're not really here. Your mind is somewhere else. So that's the real difference between Vayehi and Vehaya. But you see how a little word, what the Gemarah says, Kol Vayehi is Lashon Sar.
I was going to say Viktor Frankl's poem.
Viktor Frankl, yeah.
That's his poem.
Viktor Frankl, meaning, man in search of meaning, right? Yeah. Says the Gemarah, V'haksiv, 1 sec. Is it really so simple? V'haksiv, the Pasuk says, Parshas Shmini, Vayehi Bayoim HaShmini. It was on the 8th day. V'tanya, we learned, Oisei HaYoim, that day, the last day of dedicating the Mishkan, Yoim HaShmini, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Hoysa Simcha Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kiyam Shnivru B'Shamayim V'Aretz. There was a Simcha before Hashem, like the day of creation of heaven and earth. Ksiv Hach, it says here, Vayehi Bayoim HaShmini, Ksiv Hasam, it says there, Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Voiker, Yoim Echad. It was night, it was evening, it was morning, one day. So we learned from here, Vayehi Bayoim HaShmini, the dedication of the Mishkan was as joyous as the day of creation. When God created heaven and earth, apparently there was a big simcha by him. Listen, you create a world, it's a nice job he did. I guess I would also be besimcha. He did a fine job on the world. Take a look, study an atom, study a couple of stars, study an organism. He did a job on the world, the universe, our planet, the symmetry, the organization, the structure. It was a big simcha. Say Chazal, Vayehi Bayoim HaShmini was a similar simcha. The Mishkan was almost like a second creation. Maybe this was like the purpose of creation. So Vayehi, but what do we see from here? That it's Simcha. So the Gemarah says it's not so simple. Hashchiv Nadav Aviyu. Nadav and Aviyu died that day. Nadav and Aviyu, that day the Mishkan was dedicated. The 8th day was Taka Simcha. But the Vayehi is also a painful story. Says the Gemarah, 1 second. Vahaksiv, we have a pasuk in Kings. Malachim Aleph Perek Vav. Vayehi b'shmoinim shana v'arba meis shana. It was 80 years and 400 years after the Jews left Egypt when Shloimeh builds the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash was built 480 years after the Exodus of Egypt, which means they left Egypt. 40 years later, they come into Eretz Yisrael. 440 years later, the Beis HaMikdash gets built. You remember we spoke yesterday how the Mishkan was 14 years in Gilgal, 369 years in Shiloh, 57 years in Noiv and Givain, and finally it gets built in Yerushalayim. So this is 440 years after they enter into Eretz Yisrael. There was no Beis HaMikdash. People don't realize 440 years is a lot of time, a long time. America has not been around as the United States for 440 years, right? 2.5 centuries. 440 years is a long time without a Beis HaMikdash. They had a Mishkan. There was 480 years since Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's when Shlomo puts up the Beis HaMikdash. And it says Vayehi, Vayehi-Vehaya Abayis. He puts up the Beis HaMikdash then. That's not Sar. Vaksiv, what about another one? Parshas Vayetze. Vayehi Kasherah Yaakov es Rachel. It came to be as Yaakov saw Rachel. And what does he do? He removes the boulder, the rock, from on top of the well, and he irrigates all of the flock of Lavan, who is the brother of his mother, his uncle, for Rachel, who is his first cousin, because his mother is Rivka, and Rachel's father is Lavan, and Lavan and Rivka are siblings. And this is the first time he meets Rachel. It says, Vayehi kasher Yaakov es Rachel. V'haksiv, now come to the creation itself, Bereshis. Vayehi erev, Vayehi-Vehaya yom echad. It came to be, it was evening. It came to be, it was morning. One day, again, Vayehi. Vayika Sheni, the same as Monday. Vayika Sheni. Vayika Shlishi, Tuesday. Vayika Tuva Vayehi. And once we're at it, there's a lot of Vayehis that are associated with joy and not with pain. Besides these examples, there's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's all Vayehis. There's a lot of Vayehis. So if so, you answered Vayehi b'yom hashmini, but you have here a bunch of Vayehis and more Vayehis. The Gemarah says you could trust me, go through all the Vayehis, and not in every one will you identify Tsar. Amar Rabashi says, Kol Vayehi ikahachi ve'ikahachi. All the places where it says Vayehi, you have Azoi and you have Azoi. Meaning you have some which are associated with Simcha, you have some which are associated with Tsar. Now here's a very interesting expression in Gemarah. Kol Vayehi ikahachi ve'ikahachi. How do you translate that? Do you see the problem here? Every Vayehi, you have these and you have these. So it's not every. The Gemarah should have taken out the word Kol. He should have said Vayehi ikahachi ve'ikahachi. There are some Vayehis of Tsar and some Vayehis of Simcha. He says, Kol Vayehi, every Vayehi, ikahachi ve'ikahachi. So the Sfas Emes wants to explain something very original, that the Gemarah means that every single Vayehi has both. He says there's no joy in life that doesn't have an element of pain. And there's no pain in life that doesn't have an element of joy. So he says, Kol Vayehi, every Vayehi, ikahachi ve'ikahachi. He says, as is known. It's a very perceptive idea in the sense, perceptive insight, in the sense that there's nothing that's really complete because, we're not in the world of infinity. So in every experience of life, even in the greatest simcha, there's an experience of tsar. You can be at the most beautiful event. Let's say you're marrying off your daughter. You miss your father, you miss your mother, they're not there. Just an example. You break your glass. There's moments of tsar, but there's an element, there can be gratitude, there can be appreciation, etc. That's how he teaches. Kol Vayehi. Literally, the Gemarah means there's Vayehis like this and Vayehis like this. He's saying, Kol Vayehi, every Vayehi, ikahachi ve'ikahachi. It's not the literal pshat. The literal pshat in Gemarah is some Vayehis azai, some Vayehis. In other words, there's no klal. You can't know for sure. But then the word kol becomes superfluous. The Gemarah adds, Vayehi b'mei einei ala lashon sar. When it says Vayehi b'mei, that's a lashon sar. The word b'mei after Vayehi is a lashon sar. Another, the word Vayehi itself could be a lashon of simcha as it could be a lashon of tsar. And we have different examples. Vayehi erev Vayehi-Vehaya yom echad was simcha. Vayehi b'yom hashmini, he says, was tsar. Vayehi b'mei shveit hashoftim, tsar. Vayehi b'mei hashveit tsar. But Vayehi b'mei is always a lashon tsar. That's interesting. Vayehi b'mei. Because over there the Vayehi is superfluous. It could have just said, b'mei achashverosh, b'mei shveit hashoftim, b'mei amrafel. The Vayehi adds an expression of tsar. And also the word b'yemei, of course, means it came to be b'yemei, in the days. The Manas Halevi says that b'yemei represents the flow of time which gets depleted, which ceases, because time, what yesterday is gone, and we have only the present. That's why it's called, what they call it, present. So he says Yimei represents time, which always moves and moves and moves and moves, and we feel like we lost it, which comes back to what we discussed before, that Vayehi-Vehaya means it came to pass in the days of, which represents a past that I have no control over, because now it's different days. And that Vayehi is really the type of tsar. So we can add to what we said before now. If it's just Vayehi, it means you're describing an objective past. It came to be this and this way. Now the question is what you're going to do about it. Vayehi-Vehaya is defining an actual period of time. Vayehi-Vehaya, an actual period of time that's affected by this and this person, and therefore perhaps it shows a much more confined experience. The Gemarah says, Chamisha Vayehi-Vehaya have. We have 5 times Vayehi-Vehaya in Tanakh. Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh, Vayehi-Vehaya Shveit HaShoftim, Vayehi-Vehaya Amrafel, Vayehi-Vehaya Achaz. It was in the days of Achaz, the son of Yosem, the son of Uziyahu, and Achaz had experienced, he speaks about war that happens afterwards. 2 kings come to war. Vayehi-Vehaya Yehoyakim in Yirmiyah. The days of Yehoyakim, in his days began the Golus and the Churban, plus he was quite an evil king and he burnt Megillah Eicha that Yirmiyah wrote. So we have 5 Vayehis in the whole Tanakh. Vayehi-Vehaya in the whole Tanakh. Vayehi, we have many. Vayehi-Vehaya, we have Achashverosh, Shveit HaShoftim, Amrafel, Achaz, and Yehoyakim, and all of them represent a painful narrative. Vayehi-Vehaya is Lashon Sar. Ahava Mina in Torah is also Torah. First, the Gemarah thought that every Vayehi is Lashon Sar, and that's what we tried to explain before. Why? Then the Gemarah reaches a conclusion that Vayehi itself is not necessarily Lashon Sar. It could be Lashon Simcha, or as the Sfas Emes says, it could be a mixture of both. But Vayehi-Vehaya is Lashon Sar. What's bothering you?
The answer necessarily knew this. Why do we adding all the extra?
Maybe they taka said Vayehi-Vehaya. Maybe Rabbi Ashley is just explaining what they said. No, he brings the Iyun Yaakov says in Ein Yaakov that Vayehi-Vehaya is Lashon Sar, because why does the Torah describe the events in relationship to one person? Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh, Vayehi-Vehaya Shveit HaShoftim, Vayehi-Vehaya Amrafel, Vayehi-Vehaya Achaz, Vayehi-Vehaya Yehoyakim. Like it said, Vayehi-Vehaya, it was in those days. Why is all of history attributed to this one person? It was in his day. Like, it was in everybody. Whoever lived then, it happened in their times. It's like he becomes the embodiment of the history. Vayehi-Vehaya, in those days, this and this king went to war against this and this king. Or Vayehi-Vehaya, this and this happened. Elimelech left Beis Lechem. Or Vayehi-Vehaya, Yehoyakim became the king. It's not, no. Vayehi-Vehaya, the event is associated and attributed to this one individual. So Iyun Yaakov says, that's the Lashon Sar. What's the Havana in this? What's the explanation? Right, he was the cause of it. He was the cause of it. He was the source of it. It was defined by him. It was spinned by him. That's going to be the Tsar. Because in terms of the experience itself, mipi elyon loiseitze haroyos, like we said before, everything can be dealt with in a proactive and powerful and joyous way. But this person is the one who defined the events in a particular way. That's how he explains it. That's the Vayehi-Vehaya is Lashon Sar. From his perspective, this person is locked up in his paradigm. Yeah, that's why it's attributed to him. Like this is the way he saw the events, or he tried to define the events. Really, it's Vayehi-Vehaya Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's not in the days of Achashverosh. It's in the days of God. And it's finite. Yeah, that's another interpretation. The Monsey says, Yemei means it's all finite. It's fixed in time. It was in those days. In other words, it happens within the realm of finiteness. So that's also a Lashon Sar. It's not linked with infinity. When it comes to Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh, you can even see it because Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh, nothing bad happened yet. It was actually a very good time. It was a very good time, Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh. Mordechai was a very prominent person. Achashverosh liked him. Everybody was invited to the feast. There was no bigotry, no racism, no discrimination, no anti-Semitism, no Jewish phobia, at least on the surface. Remember, this is before Vashti was killed, before Haman was brought into the palace. Achashverosh invited everybody to the party. It says, Kiritzayin ish ve'ish. The Gemarah says, Kiritzayin Mordechai v'Haman, which means you had their food with the hechsher of the Badats, Eida HaCharedis, Rabbi Landau, Rabbanut, Mahadrin, all the good hechsherim and Monsey. So it was a beautiful moment. Kirtzayin ish ve'ish. He forced nobody. You eat what you want. You can eat glat kosher. You can eat glat treif. Yeah, you can eat this shchitta, that shchitta. You're vegetarian, vegan. Kirtzayin ish ve'ish. You drink how much you want. Every type of mashka you had there. Amachai was a beautiful time. So what's the tzara? Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh. What's the tsar? Later there's going to be a tsar. Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh. And yet the Gemarah says that Bimei is always tsar. Even if Vayehi not, Vayehi-Vehaya is tsar. So I heard a beautiful word from the Rebbe once. It was Purim Fabrengen. It was such a beautiful word. He says the tsar is that it's Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh. It's not Vayehi-Vehaya Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh. In other words, yeah, it's the era when who's the boss? Who's the king? Achashverosh is the king. Now it says in Medrash, the Ramah brings it, Achashverosh is Acharis V'Reishis Shaloi. So 3 words, the beginning and the end is his, which means it's referring to Hashem. So l'chayr, it's also b'mei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It says, but the Yitzchak Badichev once said, he said as follows. He said, Ribono Shalaylam, I have a great idea for you. If you would have put Gan Eden and Gehenna in front of our eyes, and all of the addictions of this world you would have put in a sefer called Reishis Chachma. How would you know about Taivas? From Reishis Chachma. He says, no Jew would have sinned. But in front of our eyes, you put all the temptations of this world. Gan Eden and Gehenna, you put in a sefer Reishis Chachma. He says, what do you expect? What do you expect? Put all the Taivas in Reishis Chachma, and the Gan Eden and Gehenna put, no, but not one Jew would sin. So the Rebbe said, Achashverosh, what do you see? You see Achashverosh. If you look deep, Acharis, V'Reishis, Shaloi is Hashem. It says in Megillah, there's never Hashem's name mentioned. If you look in Kisvei Arizal, he'll say, Yavai, HaMelech, V'Haman Hayoim is Yudkei Vavkei. Yavai, HaMelech, V'Haman Hayoim. He says, Havaya is the beginning of words, the end of words, gematrias, remuzim, codes, riddles. God is in Reishis Chachma. But in the revealed world is Achashverosh. He says, that's the Tsar. The Tsar was Vayehi-Vehaya Achashverosh, not Vayehi-Vehaya of Hashem and Hashem's Malchus, which is Malchus based David, which is David HaMelech HaMashiach. So even if a Jew is in comfort, he's in a comfortable place, and the king invites him, but he doesn't see a lakus, he doesn't see godliness. What does he see? He sees Olam Hazi, he sees Achashverosh. That's the Tsar. That history is attributed, it's Achashverosh's world. Yeah, God, yeah, I'll prove it. We'll have Amunah lectures, we'll learn, we'll figure it out, we'll believe, we'll this, blah, blah. It's all in Reishis Chachma. But the reality is, Achashverosh runs the world. And he's a good guy. We like him. He's not, at this point, Achashverosh is a good guy. We'll soon see he's not the best of guys. He has addiction issues, and he has women issues, and he has anti-Semitic issues too, whatever. But at this point, everything is wonderful. That's the Tsar. Vayehi-Vehaya. Who? Vayehi-Vehaya Amrafel, Shvaita Shoftim, Achaz, Yehoyakim. They're defining the narrative, and we feel that we're living in their world. That makes all the difference. Let's learn another little piece here. Amar Reb Levi says, Verstehst? Huh? Reb Levi says, we have a tradition from our fathers. Two people, Amitz and Amatzia, are brothers. Who is Amitz? Amitz is the father of Isaiah the prophet, Yeshayahu ben Amitz. Amatzia is one of the kings of Judea, one of the kings of Yehuda. Amitz and Amatzia are brothers. Micah Mashmalon. What's Reb Levi trying to teach us? Just a piece of history. By the way, Yeshaya had a father Amitz. And Yeshaya was a nephew of a king because his uncle was Amatzia. What's Pshat? Derech Hagav, I once saw in a sefer that Amitz and Amatzia is also telling something. Amitz means courage. Ometz, right? Ometz. What's Amatzia? God's courage. It says Amitz and Amatzia are always brothers. God will give you courage if you have courage. Amitz and Amatzia are brothers. They're twins. Don't hide in the closet and say, God, you're strong, come out. No. Amitz and Amatzia work together. Beautiful vart. Has to do with Vahaya and Vayehi. That's, I think, the connection in the Gemarah. What's the connection? So everybody says Reb Levi. Reb Levi said the first one, so Reb Levi says the second one. But the truth is, it's really connected. When you have Amitz, you'll be able to experience Amatzia, which is the Ometz of Yudke Vavke.
This is like from Messiah, the relation of Messias or Messias?
No, strength, like courage. You say, Yesh lo Ometz. Chazak ve'ematz, yeah, Chazak ve'ematz. Ve'ematz is be strong, be powerful. In modern Hebrew, Ometz, Yesh lo Ometz, he has courage, he has resolve. So it's beautiful. Ometz and Amatz are always brothers. They work together, right? Like God said, buy the lottery ticket, you know. Achashverosh is really, it's really Acharis V'Reishes Shaloi. Amatz v'Amatzia Achim Hava. It's really brothers, but you have to be able to see it. You have to be able to see it. In other words, don't despair and blame it on God. You know? There's a partnership. Shutuf l'Kadosh, we have to be a partner. You have to be a partner. You don't just say, I'm going to be passive in life and you do everything. Amitz and Amatzia are brothers. They work together. You know, like you say, they live in company.
Who's your brother? The king.
Yeah.
So don't worry.
And it's the king, yeah. Very good. And your brother is the king, yeah. Your brother is the king, you don't have to worry. You know, they say that there was once I don't know if it's a story or it's a mashal, but it's a good one. There was once a plane that was flying and there was tremendous turbulence, tremendous. And you know, when there's turbulence, the plane is dropping 20 feet, 30 feet. It's frightening. Everybody's screaming and hollering and texting and writing letters and confessing. And, you know, the Christians are busy doing Tzelemenzich, you know, how the Christians start Tzelemenzich, huh? You ever saw? And the Jews are eating Danishes and screaming Shema Yisrael and whatever they're doing. Huh? Shai B'Reb Moshe, Baba Sali, whatever the Kameas, Tehillim, writing a tzavah, saying vidui, etc. And there's this 8-year-old kid. He's playing Game Boy. Relaxed, 8-year-old kid playing on his game. So somebody says to him, what do you do? Why are you not nervous? He says, I'm not nervous. I'm fine. He says, why are you fine? He says, my father's the pilot. I know that he's going to take care of me. I know. My father is the pilot. That's the difference between Me'ach HaShverish and Me'ach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amatzi is the king. Frag the Gemarah, my Kamashpilin, is this just a piece of history? This vart of Amatz and Amatzi I saw somewhere. I have to look. I saw it in a Hasidic sefer. I think a sefer HaMachshav. I have to look where, but I saw it. My Kamashpilin. Ki hada Amar Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni Amar Reb Yonis Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni said name Reb Yonis Kol Kala Sheitznu V'Veis Chamiyah Zayich V'Yotzim Mena Malachim and Aviyim. Every Kala, every bride who is modest in the house of her father-in-law merits, and she sees from her emerging kings and prophets. Minalon mitamar. We see this from Tamar. And what does the Gemarah mean? The Gemarah is not necessarily saying that every single woman who's modest child is malachim and avim, but it means that a woman who behaves with refinement. So it's such a powerful thing that this is the most powerful quality for children who bring so much light to the world as kings or as prophets. And the proof is from Tamar. What's Tamar? I should just add that Ben Yehoyada says that this includes also children who are great in Torah, because the Gemarah says, Man Malki Rabbanon. Rabbanon Ikru Malachim, that sages are also called kings. So he says, Yehuda saw his daughter-in-law. He considered her a Zaina, a harlot, because she covered her face. Just because somebody has a face covered, it means she's a Zaina? What does that mean? Why? On the contrary, maybe she wants to be modest. She doesn't need everybody to see her. So she has her head covered. Why does it mean she's a Zaina? On the contrary, it's usually the opposite. Ella means no. Mishum de kisses apaneh bebeis chamiyah v'loy havayadala. It means not now, because when she was his daughter-in-law, she was not very. She was very modest, and because she was very modest, Yehuda didn't know about her privacy. So therefore, now he wouldn't even have an inkling that it was Tamar, because Tamar was not exposed to him ever. And from her come kings and prophets. From her, she has a son Peretz and a son Zarach, and Peretz becomes the great grandfather of David HaMelech. That's Melachim, and now we see that also Nevi'im, because Amatzia was a Melech Yehuda, and he came from David, who comes from Tamar, right? And Yeshaya is a Navi, and Yeshaya is a nephew of Amatzia, because his father is a brother of Amatzia. That means if Amatzia came from Tamar, Amitz also came from Tamar. So here we see that Nevi'im and Melachim come out from such a woman. That's why he was trying to say that it's two brothers. Rabbi Levi is proving who comes out. Melachim, David is one of her children. Nevi'im, Damar Rabbi Levi, Mesayres biyadenu, me'aveseinu, Amitz v'Amatzia, Achim hava. Ksiv Chazoin Yeshayo ben Amitz. Yeshayo is a son of Amitz, so Yeshaya is his nephew. So this is all Reb Shmuel explained the name of Reb Yonason, how we understand this limud, and that's why Levi told us this tradition. Amar Reb Levi also said, another fascinating tradition. We have another tradition from our forefathers. Makim Aron Eina min Amida. The space of the Aron does not occupy space. It's not part of the measurements of the Holy of Holies. What does this mean? Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brayso that supports it. Aron Shasa Moshe Yesh Le'eser Amas L'chol Ruach. The ark that Moshe built in the desert, containing the tablets, had 10 amos, 10 cubits space on every side between the Aron and the walls of Kodesh HaKadoshim. So if the ark is, let's say, in the center of the room, so if I now measure from the Aron till the wall parallel it, let's say the Aron is in the middle, and I want to go to this wall. Let's say I want to go to this is Ma'ariv, this is Mizrach, right? So I want to go to Tzaf, and I want to go to north. I'm going to find 10 amos, 10 cubits, which is, let's say, between 15 and 20 feet. The other way, also 10 amos, also between 15 and 20 feet. Okay. Uksiv, v'lifnei hadvir, the pasuk says in Melachim, in front of the dvir is a mechitza, in front of the partition separating the Kodesh HaKadoshim from the other part of the sanctuary, esrim amma oirich ve'esrim amma roichav, 20 amos length and 20 amos width. In other words, the room behind the partition separating the Holy of Holies and the other parts was 20 by 20. The Kodesh HaKadoshim was 20 cubits by 20 cubits. Approximately, let's say, 30 feet by 30 feet, or 40 feet by 40 feet. 40 feet in the length and 40 feet in the width. Esrim by Esrim. Okay? Aron Gufa Heicha. Where was the Aron? The Aron is 2.5 amos length and an amma and a half width, an amma and a half height. But let's talk about the length. 2.5 amos length. So we have a serious problem. From the Aron till one wall is 10 amos. From the Aron to the other wall is 10 amos. That's 20. The whole length of Kodesh HaKadoshim is 20 amos. It should be 22.5 amos. Because you bump into the Aron, so it's 10. You have 2.5 amos, the Aron, the length of the ark. Let's say this is the box. Now you have another 10. 22.5. It's not Esrim amos. Or the other way around, or the 20 amos width. Again, you have a problem because you have 20 till the 10 till the Aron, 10 till the Aron on the other side, but the Aron itself is an amma and a half. This teaches me that the Aron represented something that transcended space. So therefore, it was in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, but Einay min Amida, it didn't occupy the space of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. No, he says, we have this as a Messiris from our forefathers. That's what he says. That Mokam Aron Einem min Amida. Look in Rashi, Einem min Amida, the last Rashi on the first column. Einay oichas lamayit midas karka lecholz dod of klum. doesn't hold on to space to diminish the measurement of the real estate, meaning to occupy the space of the ground on all of its sides at all. Kediktani yesh, meaning width or length. Kediktani yesh le eser ames lechol ruach beemtza beis kodesh hakadoshim hayoshev v'yesh revach beinoi lebein aksolim eser ames lechol tzad. You hear? The space between him and the end until the wall 10 amas. V'chol habayis ein el chaf al chaf. In Bayis Rishon, where the Aron came, because the Aron was transported into Bayis Rishon, it's only 20 by 20. Nimtza she'enoi mema'it klum. The fascinating thing here, of course, is, this is where it gets complicated, is, the Aron itself had a size. The halach is, it had to be amasayim v'chetzi yarkei. And if you would make it in a different measurement, it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't have the holiness of the Aron. That means to make it an Aron, it had to have makom. And yet, makom ha'aron einam min amidah. So what we have here is not only something that doesn't occupy space, it's something of space that doesn't occupy space. The space itself transcends space. If you tell me spirituality also doesn't occupy space, I want to ask you, can the Holy of Holiness have love inside? Can you have love in the Kodesh HaKadoshim? How much space does it occupy? If you have 20 people in your house and they all have love inside of them, so the too much love, somebody has to leave? No, because love doesn't occupy space. I don't have a problem with something not occupying space. The chiddush of the Aron is, it's something physical that has to have makom. And if it doesn't have a shear, it's not only an optical illusion. Al pi halacha, if it doesn't have a masayim v'chetzi arkoi, it's a pasala Aron. It doesn't have the kedushas Aron. So what makes it sacred and divine? Certain measurements. It's defined by makom. And yet, that very makom, einoi min amidah. So this is a place where space and spacelessness converge into one. Because when you measure the Aron, it actually had space. And yet, when you measure the Aron in a different context, it didn't have space. So it existed in probability.
No, I think you can actually use the modern concept of
Augmented reality.
which is,
This Gemarah became a very interesting source because in the Rishonim there was a big argument between the Rashba and Rabbi Yosef Albo if God is limited by certain limits. There was a great Jewish philosopher, Rabbi Yosef Albo, 1300th Spain. He has a sefer called Sefer HaIkarim. He argues with Maimonides, Rambam. Rambam holds there's 13 principles of Jewish faith. He holds there's only three. He says 13 is too complicated. Augmented reality. The three principles, and that's Malchias, Zechroinus, and Shofris. That's Rabbi Yosef Albo. He completely argues with the Rambam. So there's 13 principles, is not the case. There's three principles of Judaism. That's it. So Rabbi Yosef Albo says, Yesh l'nimnois teva kayim b'chay kabayre. Even in the bosom of God, you could speak about things that are impossible. Why? Because that's what he writes. And it's not a problem with God, it's not a flaw. He says, for example, tell me that God can't make 2 plus 2 equal 5. He says, that's not a flaw, it just means God is normal. Tell me that God could make a child older than a mother. He says, that's stupidity. A child comes from a mother. If you come from a mother, you are younger than your mother. You can be older. And to say that God cannot do it is not a problem. Yesh l'nimnois teva kayim. There are certain things that are prevented even from God because they defy logic. And God is normal. That's what he says. The Rashba, was alarmed by this. Rashba was one of the great Rishonim in Spain, Rabbeinu Shlomo ben Aderes. The Rashba was a physician and a leader, one of the greatest sages of the time. And the Rashba says, Shalsat Shuvas Rashba, I think Simon Tafiyot Ches, he says that God is Nimna ha-nimnoyas. He's prevented from being prevented. That's how he puts it. He's Nimna from nimnoyas. Rabbi Yosef Albo says, I don't know what you're talking about. He writes, you want a clock? You want the what is it called? The arrow, the hand of a clock to move clockwise and counterclockwise simultaneously? That defies logic. Of course, God can't do that. God can take you out of Egypt. Yes. God could create a world. God could even split a sea. He somehow has the ability to split a sea. I have no problem with that. But he says, don't tell me that God could write and not write simultaneously. And the Rashba completely argues with this. And this became a major debate in philosophy. Okay. Over the generations, those who discussed it, so there's a lot of discussion of this in Chabad Chassidus, and of course they sided with the Rashba completely. They said that Rabbi Yosef Albo doesn't understand that logic was created. And therefore, he's defining God by logic itself is a creation. And if logic itself is a creation, to use logic to define God is completely wrong.
So it's basically Albo is Newtonian physicist, and Rashba is
Albo's Newtonian physics and Rashba's quantum mechanics. So this is all in the 1300s. Now, I opened up one day, a couple of years ago, a New York Times, Lahavdil, and because somebody sent me an article about quantum physics, and they write there that when somebody mentioned Stephen Hawking was alive, and when somebody mentions to Stephen Hawking quantum physics, he says, I'm opening my drawer and taking out my gun. I want to shoot myself. Because this is above my pay grade. I was not hired to do this. So what freaks him out? What freaks everybody out? What freaks everybody out is that through experiments, they realized and ascertained, and most physicists agree with this, that basically, on a certain level of reality, subatomic particles are moving clockwise and counterclockwise simultaneously. Now, what are you supposed to do with this information? Yeah? There's even a famous equation in modern physics called Schrodinger's cat, where Schrodinger explained that based on quantum physics, a cat is dead and alive simultaneously. It's dead and alive. So you say, but if you're moving this way, there's no way you could be moving this way. You could split. So they say, no, it's moving simultaneously. And you know when it splits? When you observe it. When I look at it, my observation causes it to collapse into a model. And now one part of the subatomic particle will move this way, and one part will move the other way. Why? Because my observation imposes my definitions of reality on it, and therefore it's going to be forced to act in logical ways. Okay? Now when you look at this Gemarah, of course, Kodesh HaKadoshim was the one place where there was no observation.
there's still observer.
HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yeah.
Without at least one observer,
Right.
the whole world collapses.
Yeah. So the Kohen Gadol went in there only once a year, Kodesh HaKadoshim. And we know that if he wasn't in a certain state, he would not be able to survive. And the Gemarah here describes clearly Makim Ha'aron Einem in Amida. In other words, there's a Makim Ha'aron. It's not spiritual, because if it's spiritual, it's not an aron. It has to be a physical box made of wood, covered with gold, or 3 boxes, with measurements that had to be measured. I don't know if they used measuring sticks, measuring tape, however they measured the wood in the box. It has to be measured. It has to be physical. In other words, it exists in space. And yet the very same aron is Makam Aron Einem in Amida. It doesn't occupy space. No, when Betzalel built the Aron, they had to measure. The first time they had to measure it. And that Aron remained for hundreds of years. Of course. The Aron was brought from the Midbar into Eretz Yisrael, of course. No, before they built. When he built the Aron in this week's Parsha, V'asu Aron. The second Beis HaMikdash didn't have the Aron because Yoshio concealed it. Huh? The second Beis HaMikdash just doesn't exist. Second Beis HaMikdash didn't operate on quantum physics. Second Beis HaMikdash operated more in Teva. The first Beis HaMikdash, it didn't even exist till the end of the first Beis HaMikdash. Yoshio HaMelech already put it away. He hid it in the tunnels under the Harabayas because he saw it's coming. He hid 5 things: the Aron, the bottle of the man, the Shemen HaMishcha, the stick of Aaron, and the Urim V'Tumim. And they did not come back in the second Beis HaMikdash. Everything remained and remains concealed to this very day.
Movement also, it says, yeah, it's not Shul, the Kruvim.
The Kruvim. Yeah, the Kruvim, yeah. The Kruvim. It's not if they measured or not. It's the Mokim Ha'aron Einim and Amida. It was something that did not have.
But when they constructed it, they must have had
No, of course. Amasayim v'chetzi arka. It had to be 2.5 amas. Huh? Has to fit. Yes, much less. Much less.
It definitely fits there. It sits somewhere in the middle and nobody measures. Who can measure it? When a bottle comes with a measurement stick.
Did it say somewhere that they put it in there, this measurement, or it happened to be like that?
If it didn't have the measurement of the Aron, it would never become an Aron that has the holiness of the Aron that could be Einay Min Amida. So actually, to come to Einay Min Amida, you have to go through Mida. You have to go through Mida. It's much deeper. Yeah, it's through Mida you can come to Einay Min Amida. Through Gvul you came to Bli Gvul. It's a whole different Madrega. Not just a synthesis. It's through the finite that you can touch the infinite. Only through the finite. When listen, the Kajnitz Magid, when he was right before he died, so he told his son that he said, "Chabshinish can give. I'm not a body anymore. I'm only a soul." So his son grabbed onto his hand and he says, "Tata, ich tap the hand. I feel your body." What do you mean you don't have a body? So he said these words in Polish or Yiddish. He says, "The taps mit gif fills the gif. You're touching me with your body, so that's what you're experiencing." You're touching with your body. Of course you feel a body. How are you supposed to feel something else? What are the instruments you're using for reality? I'm using my fingers. What am I supposed to feel? Your soul? I'm looking at the Adar. What do you want I should see? I'm looking with my eyes. My eyes experience what my eyes can see. I can't see a soul. The same question came up by Chanukah. The Mefarshim struggle very much. What was the ness? For 8 days, the oil lasted and it burnt. Yeah. So literally, the main pshat is, the Beis Yosef says, that the first night, the oil was depleted. And then suddenly, boom, there's new oil. Second night it was depleted, and suddenly new oil. But they said that doesn't make sense, because the Torah says, Shemen Zayis. You can only fulfill the mitzvah if it's olive oil, not if it's miraculous oil. It has to be olive oil. What does it help? God pours oil from heaven. You can't do the mitzvah. It's a Shemen Zayis. You can't do the mitzvah. So another interpretation is that new oil that wasn't added, but rather the Pri Chadar says the oil increased in caliber, meaning its power increased 8-fold. So if this oil would usually burn in one night, only 1/8 of it burnt. Here again they ask a question. It's not the qualities of olive oil. It's a different type of oil. It's mamish not the qualities of it's because it's physically olive oil, but it was transformed. Its properties were transformed. And also it says that you have to fill it up. You have to fill up the keli. You have to give the shear. It has to be the full shear, and this wasn't the full shear. So one way of understanding this is, I heard this also from the Rebbe, big chiddush, what he touched in Chanukah, that it's based on this Gemarah. What happened on Chanukah was that the Kodesh HaKadoshim was translated into the menorah. The oil burnt, it was consumed, and it was not consumed. The oil was consumed by the fire, and yet, Nimna HaNimnoyos, at that moment, it was not consumed. Just like it says by the sneh, that it burnt, but it wasn't consumed. Because but here it had to be even deeper. Because shemen lamoyer, it has to be oil that's consumed by a flame. Because if not, it's not the oil of the menorah. And yet, in the morning, the oil was there. Not because it wasn't consumed. It was consumed. But it was consumed. And while it was being consumed, it was not consumed simultaneously. That was the chiddush of Chanukah. A whole different word. But in order for it to be consumed, it had to be natural oil. Natural oil is consumed, because if not, there wouldn't be the mitzvah. If it wouldn't be the mitzvah, there wouldn't be a miracle. It's just like the Aron. It had to have a measurement in order to touch that which is beyond measurement. Finally, the real question you have to ask is, why was it so important that the Makam Aron should not be min midah? Why was that so important that the Aron should not have a midah? Well, let's say, what have a midah? What? There's something about the Aron, that it doesn't have a midah. So there's the literal and the more spiritual. On a literal level, it's very deep. because it basically meant it's the future, it was the eternity of the Jewish people. Because if the Aron had a space, it would mean that it's defined by space. And if it's defined by space, it would mean that after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, we would lose our space, our epicenter. And that would be the end of the people. Makam Aron Einim in Amida meant that it's space. It has space, but it's also spaceless. So therefore, it could be everywhere simultaneously. So even when the physical space was destroyed, most nations, when they lost their capital and their epicenter, they assimilated because they didn't have anymore the space that they can call their own. But since the essence of the Jewish people is Torah, and Makam Ha'aron Einim Min Amida, so therefore was never confined by that space. So wherever a Jew is, he could connect to the Makam Ha'aron because it's Einim Min Amida and be in Kodesh HaKadoshim. So in many ways it made the Aron and the Kodesh HaKadoshim portable because it's not defined by a particular space. So wherever you are, you can go into the Aron and go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and that maintained by Jews a very powerful identity. Even if geographically you're not there, you could still be there. On a deeper level, it has to do with what we're learning in the Maimer Chayev Inish L'Bsuma B'Puria and Torah, that if Torah is a mashal hakadmoini, as we're going to see in the future, so it's a mashal for kadmoina shalaylam, so the essence of Torah is really spaceless. And that's why Makam Ha'aron Einim Min Amida. Okay, but this is, I think, enough for today. Everybody have a wonderful day and a good Shabbos. And remember the difference of Vayehi and Vehaya, or Vayehi-Vehaya and Vehaya. So Sunday, we're going to have a shir an hour later, 8 and 8:45, okay?
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.